I can only see, I can only feel, I can only hear, I can only smell. These are the things I can do with my entire being for her. Within unbroken loyalty, those things are alive. It is called loyalty, but I do not know whether it is longing or an unconscious act. In this story, one by one, I leave behind what you must consider. This is where our story begins. Every morning, she began her day the same way. She stood by the small table near the front door, searching for her car keys among the clutter, slipping her wallet into her worn canvas bag, then slowly, carefully, easing her feet into her shoes. The left one first, always the left. During all of that, Harper, the German shepherd, stood beside the door. He did not sit. He did not shift his weight. He did not move ahead or glance away. He simply stayed, right there, exactly where he knew he should be, as he always was. Before closing the door, she would pause for a moment, her hand resting on the frame, and gently pull a strand of Harper's fur caught along the edge of the doorway. A single gray hair, slightly coarser than it used to be, pinched carefully between her thumb and forefinger, brushed away without thought, let go into the morning air. Harper watched her do it, his dark eyes following the small motion of her hand, and remained exactly where he was. It was the same when they went out for walks, and the same on days they did not. Short, unhurried loops around the neighborhood, afternoons spent stopping by a friend's house for coffee and conversation, or days when her back hurt too much to do much of anything, and she chose instead to sit beneath the old gazebo at the edge of the park, talking about nothing in particular. The weather, a neighbor's new fence, someone's grandchild visiting from the city, while people drank coffee from paper cups, their voices rising and falling in familiar rhythms, repeating the same thoughts about the heat or the cold to one another. Harper sat quietly in the shade, his body relaxed but attentive, waiting for the moment she would stand, for the shift in her posture that meant it was time to go. On days they stopped in a small grocery store to buy bread and milk, sometimes eggs, while she counted out coins at the register, fumbling slightly with the change. Harper stood beside her in line, close enough that she could feel his presence, but never so close that he was in anyone's way. When they attended a friend's grandson's wedding one summer afternoon, Harper seemed to know instinctively where to stand among the guests, near the back, off to the side, a place where he would not block anyone's view, where he could see her clearly and she could see him. When they crossed the narrow wooden bridge over the creek on the way to the hardware store her granddaughter ran, Harper kept to her side, half a step behind, his gait matching hers exactly. Even when the water moved loudly beneath the old boards, swollen from recent rain, even when the wood creaked and groaned with age, protesting beneath their weight. Harper did not hesitate, did not stop, did not pull ahead or lag behind. She was not a confident driver. She never had been, really. Her old car rattled when it reached certain speeds, the engine loud and uneven, the steering wheel sometimes slow to respond, requiring more effort than it once did. Still, Harper climbed into the back seat as if it were the most ordinary thing in the world, settling himself carefully on the worn upholstery, his chin resting on the edge of the seat, watching the world pass by through the window. When they arrived somewhere, a parking lot, a driveway, the side of a quiet street, he did not jump out first. He waited, patient and still, until she opened the door, gathered her bag, and placed both feet firmly on the ground. Only then would he follow. Whether snow was falling soft and steady, rain pouring down in sheets that blurred the edges of everything, or spring sunlight settling gently on the pavement, warm and golden and full of promise, Harper was always there. They walked at the same pace, looked in the same direction, stopped at the same moments, as if they had rehearsed it 1,000 times, which, in a way, they had. With each passing year, her steps grew just a little slower, a little more careful, a little more deliberate. Harper adjusted without hesitation, without complaint, as though the rhythm had always been this way. Harper never spoke, but he remembered everything. The park bench that felt unusually cold one October afternoon, the metal chilled beneath them despite the sun, the sound of laughter turning unexpectedly into tears at the wedding, the bride's father unable to finish his toast, the rush of water beneath the bridge after the storm, urgent and alive, the small brass bell ringing above the hardware store door, the same cheerful sound it had made for 30 years, and the brief, gentle touch of her fingers as she brushed his fur from the doorway each morning. That small gesture repeated so many times, it had become a kind of prayer. He accepted all of it as part of living, the ordinary and the extraordinary, woven together, inseparable, each moment given the same quiet attention, the same steady presence. Those memories did not fade in the rain, and time did not wear them down. They lived in his chest, in the rhythm of his breathing, in the way he knew her footsteps from 20 paces away, in the way he could sense when she was tired, when she was sad, when she needed him close, but did not know how to ask. Every morning she began her day the same way, and every morning Harper was there. The rain did not come all at once. It fell lightly at first, as if something that had been suspended in the air, held there by invisible hands, had only just decided it was time to let go, time to descend. The aging daughter took an umbrella from the ceramic stand by the front door. It was an old one, The fabric faded to a softer shade of navy than it had once been, the handle slightly bent from years of use, from being gripped too tightly on windier days, from being forgotten in the back seat of cars. They say it's not supposed to be heavy. She said it casually, her voice carrying that particular tone people use when they're trying to sound unconcerned but are not entirely convinced themselves. Still, she did not put the umbrella back. The grandmother nodded as she slipped on her shoes. The same deliberate motion as always. Left foot first, then the right, taking her time, finding her balance. A little rain is fine. We've walked in worse. Harper stood by the door, his body perfectly still, watching the entire exchange without moving, without making a sound, his eyes moving from one woman to the other as if he were following a conversation whose meaning went beyond words. After a brief hesitation, a moment where she seemed to weigh something in her mind, the daughter handed the umbrella to her mother. Just take it anyway, for me. The grandmother accepted it with a small smile, opened it once to test the mechanism, the metal ribs expanding with a soft, clicking sound. The fabric didn't stretch perfectly taut, one section sagging slightly where the spring had weakened, but it seemed good enough. She closed it again and tucked it under her arm. When they stepped outside, the rain brushed against hair and shoulders, barely there, almost uncertain, as if it hadn't yet committed to being a real storm, as if it might still change its mind. Small droplets gathered along Harper's back, catching in the thick fur, beating there like tiny glass ornaments before slowly soaking through. Then, for just a moment, Harper lifted his ears, not quickly, not with alarm, but with attention, a subtle vibration, one that never reached human feet, one that existed below the threshold of their awareness, traveled upward through the ground, through soil and stone and the roots of old trees, through the concrete foundation of houses, through the street itself. The grandmother did not stop walking. She had felt nothing. Her shoes met the wet pavement in their usual rhythm, steady and unhurried. But Harper paused for an instant. In that very brief moment, shorter than a breath, the unfamiliar tremor reached his body first, through his paws, up through his legs, settling somewhere deep in his chest, like a question without an answer. The rain grew slightly heavier, the drops larger now, more insistent, but still there was no reason to open the umbrella yet, no reason to hurry. From the window face in the yard, one hand holding the curtain aside, the aging daughter watched them leave. Beneath the umbrella, still closed and tucked under her mother's arm, two silhouettes moved slowly down the sidewalk, one upright and careful, one lower to the ground and watchful, both growing smaller with distance. Along the street, rainwater began to gather in the places it always did. the slight depression near the storm drain, the crack in the asphalt that the city had never repaired, the spot where tree roots had pushed the concrete up and created a shallow basin. Very slowly, the water pooled, drawn together as if pulled by a magnet, as if it knew where it belonged. Harper's paws pressed into the wet asphalt, leaving dark prints that disappeared almost as quickly as they formed. The cold sensation rose upward, through the pads of his feet, through muscle and bone, earlier than it did for humans, sharper, more clearly defined, more impossible to ignore. Harper lifted his head and looked at the grandmother, a wrinkled face, softened by time and weather, wrinkled hands gripping the umbrella, the blue veins visible beneath translucent skin. Her image passed through his sight like fragments of memory, brief and overlapping. Her face as it was now, her face as it had been. The changes so gradual he had witnessed them all had been there for every single one. The air carried more than the scent of rain. It carried something else, something that made Harper's instincts stir, made the fur along his spine want to rise, made him want to press closer to her, though he did not yet know why. Harper raised his head higher and drew in a deep breath, pulling the air across the sensitive receptors in his nose, sorting through the information. Wet earth, gasoline from a passing car, the neighbor's roses, and underneath it all, something he could not name. Then the grandmother spoke to him, her voice quiet, almost lost in the sound of rain. Stay closer. Harper did not change his position. He was already as close as he knew how to be. And then he breathed in once more, deeply, slowly, trying to understand what it was the world was trying to tell him. At first, the rain fell lightly. The sound tapping against the umbrella was steady and rhythmic, a familiar percussion, and Harper listened quietly to the pattern as it changed, as it grew from scattered drops to something more insistent, more deliberate. But after only a few minutes, everything shifted. It was no longer individual raindrops, no longer separate sounds you could count. It struck the umbrella like falling sheets of water, like the sky had opened all at once and emptied itself. The wind suddenly changed direction, no longer blowing steadily from one side, but swirling, unpredictable, and the rain bent sideways, slashing against their faces, cold and stinging. Harper slowed his pace, then stopped completely, stepping deliberately in front of the woman as if to block her path, as if his body alone could redirect her. The woman paused, her feet uncertain on the slick pavement, not yet understanding why he had stopped, not yet seeing what he had already sensed. Time seemed to slow, and within that slow time, the water changed far too quickly. In just minutes, perhaps less, water rose past their ankles. What had been a thin film sliding across asphalt, harmless and temporary, began to deepen, to gather weight and momentum, pushing against itself, finding direction, becoming something with intention. Each step now pulled at their legs, the water offering resistance, claiming space. Harper already knew, from the vibration rising through the ground, deeper now, more persistent, from the sharp smell carried in the air, metallic and electric, the smell of earth torn open, of things displaced. This road, this familiar stretch of pavement they had walked 100 times, was about to stop being a road. Harper lowered his body, his center of gravity dropping, and deliberately blocked the direction she had been walking. Straight ahead, toward the route they always took, the shortest way home. It was already too late. "Why are you stopping?" "Harper, what is it?" Her voice wavered, half swallowed by rain and wind. Harper did not bark. He rarely barked, and this moment required something different, something quieter but more insistent. Instead, he turned his body sideways, using his weight, nudging her gently but firmly toward higher ground, away from the road, away from what he knew was coming. As he did, the water continued to rise, not gradually, not politely. The edges of the street disappeared beneath the surface, curbs vanishing, sidewalks becoming indistinguishable from road, and the two of them, woman and dog, were becoming isolated, like a small island forming beneath their feet, shrinking with every passing second. And ahead of them, somewhere through the curtain of rain, was the river. Normally, it was nothing more than a short crossing, a bridge they barely noticed, a slow, familiar current beneath wooden planks, a place that barely registered as danger. Now, it was not the same river. It had climbed beyond its banks, spreading outward in all directions, not flowing so much as surging, consuming, erasing the boundaries that had once contained it. From its direction came a low roar, not the roar of wind, but something heavier, deeper, the sound of water forcing itself beyond where it belonged, taking everything with it. The woman stopped. She could see it now. She could hear it. She could not go any farther. Harper looked at the river, his eyes tracking its movement, quickly reading the direction and speed of the current, the way debris moved within it. Branches, pieces of fence, things he couldn't identify, all moving fast, chaotic, deadly. She could not swim. Harper knew this. He had always known this. Harper turned back and looked at her, really looked at her face, pale with cold and fear, at her hands trembling as they gripped the useless umbrella, at the way she was looking at him, waiting for him to decide. And in his body, in the deep animal knowing that lived beneath thought, he understood. From this point on, there would be no turning back. He stepped toward the river, his body tense, every muscle coiled, then stopped at the very edge. One front paw hovered above the water, trembling slightly in the air. not from cold, but from the knowledge of what he was about to do. This was not water, Harper recognized. The smell, the sound, the violent movement, all of it was different, all of it wrong. He lowered his head, staring into the current, watching it tear past, knowing that once he entered it, control would no longer be his. His ears flattened back against his skull. His chest rose and fell rapidly, breath coming fast and shallow. Harper knew he could still run. Even now, even at this moment, he could still retreat, could pull her back toward higher ground, could wait, could hope. Then the woman's hand hovered just above his head, reaching out but not yet touching, as if asking permission. A brief hesitation, a moment suspended between choice and inevitability, before her fingers came down, gripping the wet fur tightly, desperately. Harper waited for the full weight of that hand, for the trust it carried, for what it meant. And the moment it settled onto his head, the moment he felt her surrender her safety to him completely, Harper barked once, short, sharp, unmistakable. It was not a sound meant for the world, not an alarm or a warning to others, but directed only at her, only at this woman whose life had been woven into his own so thoroughly he could no longer separate them. Now, hold on to me. Trust me completely. If we don't go now, this is where it ends. Harper closed his eyes for just a second, gathering himself, feeling his heart pound against his ribs. There were no words, but the woman already understood. She grabbed his head with both hands, her fingers digging into the thick fur at his neck, holding on with everything she had. Harper lowered his body into the water first. The current immediately shoved against him, brutal and unforgiving, far stronger than he had anticipated. His legs could not find the bottom, and his body was pushed sideways, spun, disoriented. He turned his body at an angle, not straight into the current, which would have been suicide, but diagonally, searching instinctively for where the force was weakest, for the seams in the chaos. The woman did not let go. She surrendered her weight completely, her legs floating behind her, trusting his movement with everything she had, with her life, with the last moments she might ever have. The water slammed into Harper's chest, driving the air from his lungs. His breaths grew short, panicked, each one a fight. Then, caught by a fast spinning surge, a whirlpool forming where currents collided, they were pulled under together. Harper fought to regain his breath, his mouth filling with water, his nose burning, dragged downward for what felt like far too long, longer than any creature could survive. That was when the woman realized. The grip in her hands, wrapped around Harper's neck, was weakening, not because she wanted to let go, but because her strength was leaving her, draining away into the cold water. Still, Harper did not rush. Even now, even drowning, he did not try to cross all at once. did not fight the river directly. He waited for brief moments when the current eased, when the water took a breath, then moved forward inch by inch, paw by desperate paw. How much time passed, there was no way to know. Seconds could have been minutes. Minutes could have been hours. Only this, if he stopped, if he gave up even for a moment, it would be over. At last, the feeling beneath his paws changed. Firm ground, earth that did not slide away, soil that held. With his remaining strength, every muscle screaming, Harper pulled himself forward, clawing at the bank, dragging them both, and only then did the woman emerge from the river, gasping, choking, alive. They crawled out of the water and climbed toward higher ground, almost on hands and knees, bodies heavy, movements slow and clumsy, collapsing finally on solid earth. From above, from where they now lay, the world below was unrecognizable. The river had abandoned its course entirely, carrying houses and streets along with it, tearing through neighborhoods like they were made of paper. Yards were gone, gardens, porches, the places where children played, all of it erased. Fences lay twisted and directionless, ripped from the ground, floating. Cars and trees moved together, tilting and colliding, tumbling, dragged by the same relentless force, all heading toward some distant, inevitable destruction. Everything below was still in motion, still being unmade. They stood there eventually, soaked and shaking, staring at what had almost swallowed them. Harper's body trembled from cold, from exhaustion, from the aftermath of adrenaline, but he did not step back, did not look away. The woman's hand came to rest on his head, gentle now, no longer gripping, but simply touching, feeling the life still in him. No words were spoken. There were no words for this. Harper shook his body once, violently, as if only to fling the water away, as if the simple act of shedding wetness could also shed what had just happened. That day, Harper did not think about loyalty, did not think about duty, did not think about the choices he had made. He simply carried what he had always known, what had been built into him day by day, year by year, walk by walk, all the way through with his body. Night did not arrive all at once as the rain eased, not stopping entirely, but loosening its grip, becoming something softer, more resigned. Darkness slowly spread across the high ground, seeping in from the edges, as if nothing unusual had happened at all, as if this were just another evening settling into place. But below, somewhere in the void they could no longer see clearly, the water was still moving. Even without seeing it, even without looking down into that darkness, you could hear it, the relentless sound of movement, of displacement, of a world being rearranged, things being carried away, things colliding with terrible force, things disappearing into somewhere unseen, somewhere final. The sound did not fade. As the night deepened, as the sky turned from gray to black, it grew sharper, more distinct, as if the darkness made it easier to hear what you could no longer see. The water had not yet found where it belonged. It kept searching, kept moving, kept taking. The grandmother sat carefully on the soaked ground, her clothes heavy with water, her body exhausted beyond anything she had known. As she drew her body inward, folding into herself, trying to conserve what little warmth remained, her breathing grew slightly rough, catching in her throat, each exhale trembling. Harper sat down right beside her. So close, their bodies touched. He pressed his body against hers, offered his back as shelter, as warmth, as something solid in a world that had become fluid and uncertain and did not move. Water was still slowly dripping from Harper's fur, running down his legs, pooling beneath him. But he did not shake himself. This was not the time for that. Harper could not keep his weight on one front leg for very long. Something had happened in the water. A twist, a collision with debris, a price paid for their survival. Each time he tried to adjust his stance, to shift the burden to his other side, his body swayed just slightly, betraying pain he would not voice. With every breath he took in, his ribs stood out a little more clearly beneath his wet fur, his sides rising and falling with more effort than usual. Even so, Harper did not change position. He stayed. The grandmother's hand slowly moved to the back of Harper's neck, trembling, cold, searching for connection. She grasped his wet fur as if holding on to the only solid thing left in the world, and rested her forehead against him, feeling his warmth, feeling his breathing, feeling proof that they were both somehow still here. There were no words. None were needed. The night air was cold, colder than it should have been for this time of year, made worse by wet clothes, by exhaustion, by shock settling into their bones. In the rain-washed air, the scent of earth and water mixed with wet wood, torn vegetation, and something metallic, unsettling. Harper did not lift his head. Instead, he deliberately slowed his breathing, long, measured breaths, in and out, matching the grandmother's rhythm. From below, from the flooded darkness where their neighborhood had been, the sound of sirens drifted faintly upward. They did not come closer. They did not disappear. They sounded distant, unreached. Harper did not react. What needed guarding was not below, but right beside him. The night grew deeper. No stars were visible. The moon was hidden behind clouds that held the sky closed. There was no light on the high ground, no street lamps, no glowing windows, no passing headlights, only darkness. Even so, Harper did not close his eyes. He did not sleep. The grandmother's hand loosened just slightly. Harper felt the change through his body. the subtle shift of her weight, the slowing of her breath. He adjusted his position just a little, carefully. He shifted his weight to the less painful side and pressed himself a bit closer, closer, warmer. Below, the water was still moving. The night was long, and it was not yet over. That night, Harper did nothing but protect. He held on. He endured. He did not let go. And that had to be enough. That night, having left behind everything except what needed to be protected, they passed all the way through. Together, still breathing, still here. And when the first gray light began to soften the eastern sky, neither of them moved. They remained where the night had left them, waiting to see what the daylight would reveal. Time did not arrive all at once. There was no single day that felt like an ending, no moment that announced itself clearly as the start of something irreversible, no morning when she woke and understood with sudden clarity that everything had fundamentally changed. Instead, the same days, the same quiet rituals, the same rooms filled with familiar light, the same sounds of the neighborhood waking, began to wear slightly different expressions, like a photograph left too long in sunlight. The colors shifting so gradually, you don't notice until you compare it to what it once was. Even after the rain stopped, after the flood became memory, after the physical scars on the landscape began their slow process of healing, her cough remained. Morning sunlight reached the kitchen floor as always, spreading across the tiles in the same golden pattern it had traced for decades, but her breath returned half a beat late, as if she had to reach further for it now, had to remind her lungs of their basic function. Harper noticed the change before it became words, before anyone spoke of doctor visits or tests or concerns. He sensed it in the air itself. The house no longer felt the same. Something in its atmosphere had shifted, subtle but unmistakable to a creature who lived by sensing what couldn't be seen. Even during hours that should have been warm, when afternoon sun poured through windows and the heating hummed steadily, something cold lingered in the corners, a chill that seemed to emanate not from the walls, but from her, from deep inside her changing body. When they went out for walks, moving through the neighborhood along routes worn smooth by years of repetition, her shoelaces came loose more often. Her fingers, once nimble and certain, now fumbled with the loops. Each time, she bent to tie them again, carefully, slowly. One hand braced against her knee for balance, and each time it took longer for her to straighten up, longer for her spine to remember how to stack vertebrae into vertical, longer for her to catch the breath that bending had stolen. Harper did not move during these moments. He watched with the attention of someone reading a language only he could understand. The speed at which the door opened, the angle of her first step onto the pavement, The brief pauses when she stopped mid-stride to catch her breath, to orient herself, to gather strength for what came next. Harper remembered all of it. He cataloged every small change, every new hesitation, every sign that her body was slowly negotiating new terms with itself. The route was the same streets, the same landmarks, the same neighbors' houses they'd passed 1,000 times, but the way she walked had changed entirely. What once flowed now stuttered. What once was automatic now required thought, effort, conscious will. They stopped more often beneath the old oak tree, its branches spreading wide like a grandmother's arms, offering shade, offering rest, and the time she spent sitting on the weathered park bench, her body settling into the familiar grooves, worn by years of other tired bodies, looking up at the sky through gaps in the leaves, grew longer. Sometimes she would sit there for 5 minutes, then 10, then 15, saying nothing, just breathing, just existing in the space between effort and recovery. Near that bench, there were still signs that had not fully disappeared, evidence that persisted despite the world's desire to move on, to forget. A year earlier, water had rushed through that path with terrible force. A faint brown line remained on the oak's trunk, marking how high the flood had risen. A horizontal scar about 4 feet up, permanent now, part of the tree's history. Small branches, carried from somewhere upstream, tangled beneath the iron fence, dried and grayed, but still caught there, still waiting to be freed. Fresh soil beside patches of grass that had not yet settled in, their color slightly different, their texture not quite right, new growth trying to match what had been there before, but not quite succeeding. People passed by as if nothing had happened, as if this place held no particular significance, as if one night a year ago the world hadn't almost ended here. Harper always slowed there. His pace would change, his body would tense slightly, his nose would lift as if reading information written in the air itself. Each time, sensing his shift, she would rest a hand on his back, a gentle touch, reassuring, acknowledging. "Let's sit for a minute." She said it lightly, as if it were a choice, as if they were stopping because the day was pleasant, and not because her body demanded it. But her hand stayed longer than before, resting on his fur with a weight that spoke of dependence, of gratitude, of things neither of them could articulate, but both understood completely. When they returned home, she often stood in the entryway, even after removing her coat, after hanging it carefully on the brass hook that had held countless coats over countless years. She would stand there, one hand on the wall, waiting until her breathing fully returned, or at least returned enough that she could move to the next thing. Harper sat in front of her during these moments and waited with her. He did not close his eyes. He did not shift his position. He did not grow impatient or look away. He simply held space, his presence saying, "Take your time. I'm not going anywhere. Nothing matters more than this." At night, the coughing came more often. It started as a small thing, a clearing of the throat, easily dismissed. Then it deepened, became something that rattled in her chest, something that woke her from already shallow sleep, something that left her gasping, exhausted, frightened in ways she tried not to show. Outside the window, the seasons were quietly changing, performing their ancient rotation with indifference to human suffering. Leaves gathered thicker on the ground, accumulate in corners, against fences, in small drifts that whispered when the wind moved through them. The wind against the glass grew lower in pitch, more insistent, and lingered longer, as if trying to get in, as if it had something urgent to say. One day, a bottle of pills appeared on the kitchen table, small, orange, labeled with her name, and instructions and warnings. Then another bottle, then a third, a small pharmacy growing in the space where fruit had once sat, where normal life had once happened. A glass of water was always placed beside them, ready, necessary, waiting for the ritual that structured her days now. After taking her medication, after swallowing the pills that promised to help without promising to cure, her hands felt slightly colder, the warmth seeming to drain from her extremities, pulled inward to protect more vital organs. Harper rested his chin gently on top of them, his body heat offered without ceremony, and stayed there, still, patient, unwavering, until the warmth returned, until circulation found its way back to her fingers, until she seemed a little more present, a little less distant. They never stopped walking altogether. She was stubborn that way, had always been stubborn, had always believed that to stop moving was to surrender, was to let the illness win. The path simply folded inward, closer and closer to home, the circumference of her world shrinking gradually, contracting like a closing iris. What had been a neighborhood loop became a walk to the corner. What had been a walk to the corner became a trip to the mailbox. Sometimes 10 minutes outside was enough, enough to feel the air, enough to prove to herself she still could, enough to remember what it meant to inhabit a body that moved through the world. Harper did not mind. He had never walked for the destination. Distance was not the problem. Stopping was. She stopped more often now, and each pause lasted a little longer than the one before, each rest period stretching from seconds into minutes, each moment of stillness carrying more weight, more uncertainty, more of the question neither of them wanted to ask. Will she be able to start again? Harper remained beside her during every pause, not ahead, straining against an invisible leash, eager to continue, not behind, reluctant or distracted, just there, exactly, parallel, exactly aligned. His position saying, we move together, we stop together. There is no rush. There is only this. One night, she did not get out of bed for a long time. The usual morning sequence, alarm, silence it, feet to floor, stand, begin, did not happen. She lay there, her eyes closed, her breathing uneven, sometimes shallow and rapid, sometimes deep and labored, the rhythm completely lost. Her eyes stayed closed, but her hand moved, searching the space beside her, reaching, groping, looking for confirmation of a presence she knew was there but needed to feel. Harper already knew where it would land. He had positioned himself exactly where she would reach, had learned over years to anticipate her needs before she expressed them. When her fingers finally found the thick fur at his neck, when they curled into it with desperate gratitude, he moved a little closer, pressing his body against the bed, his warmth seeping through the blanket, his presence saying, I'm here. I've always been here. I will stay. After that night, time began to tilt, slowly, almost invisibly, like a table with one leg slightly shorter than the others. The imbalance so subtle you don't notice it until you set something down and watch it slowly slide. People called it an illness. They gave it names, spoke about it in hushed voices, used phrases like quality of life, as if language could contain what was happening, as if naming it gave them some measure of control. Harper did not call it anything. To him, it was simply one more day that needed to be kept, one more night that needed to be guarded, one more moment when his presence mattered more than it ever had before. And each day passed like the place where the water once ran, the mark on the tree trunk, the branches in the fence, the new grass that didn't quite match, quietly but unmistakably leaving behind evidence of its passage, changing the landscape in ways that could never be undone, while taking a little less of her with it each time, carving her down slowly, relentlessly, until what remained was something lighter, more precious for its very impermanence. Morning light broke through the gap in the curtains, the same thin blade of sun that had fallen across the floorboards every day for 9 years. Harper knew its angle by heart. He knew how it crept from the baseboard to the edge of the rug, how it warmed a single patch of wood near the door. He was already there, waiting. His body ached in ways it hadn't before. His hips were stiff from the cold floor. When he shifted his weight, something deep in his joints clicked softly. He ignored it. The door would open. It always did. He listened. The refrigerator hummed in the kitchen. Somewhere in the walls, a pipe ticked as it expanded with warmth. The house was breathing, but it was the wrong breath. No shuffle of slippers. No voice humming under her breath. No hand reaching for the doorknob. Harper pressed his nose, against the base of the door. The metal was cold. It used to be warm every morning, warmed by her palm before he ever touched it. He sat. His tail did not wag. His ears stood alert, listening for the smallest shift in the air, the faintest sound that might mean she was coming. But there was nothing. When the door finally opened, it was not her. A man stepped through, someone Harper had seen before, but whose scent was wrong, too sharp, too hurried. Harper stood slowly, his legs trembling beneath him. He walked past the man without looking up. Outside, the air was thin and cold. It bit at his nose, made his eyes water. He blinked it away and kept walking. The road looked the same cracks in the pavement, the same faded yellow line down the center, the same tree at the corner, its branches bare and skeletal against the gray sky. Harper stopped at the gazebo. He pressed his nose against the wooden post where her hand used to rest. The paint was chipped there, worn smooth by years of her touch. He inhaled deeply. Her scent was still there, faint, buried under layers of rain and dust and time. But there he sat. The wind moved through his fur, cold and relentless. He did not move. If he stayed still enough, maybe she would appear at the end of the path. Maybe today would be the day. But the path remained empty. Harper walked to the bridge. His steps were slow, deliberate. Each paw placement required thought now. His body no longer obeyed him the way it once had. The wooden planks groaned under his weight. The sound echoed beneath him, hollow and lonely. He stopped in the middle, listened. Nothing. He crossed to the other side and pushed open the door to the shop. The bell rang, a bright, cheerful sound that felt wrong in the silence that followed. The shop was empty. Harper walked the same path she used to walk, along the counter, past the shelves, around the small table near the window. He stopped where she used to stand. The floor still smelled faintly of coffee and soap, but she was not there. The next morning, Harper stood at the door again, and the morning after that, and the one after that. Someone, her daughter, maybe, left food in a bowl outside. The smell of meat rose sharp and warm into the air. Harper's stomach clenched with hunger. He did not eat. If he ate, he might miss the sound of the door. He might miss her footsteps on the porch. He might miss the one moment when she came back. So he waited. His ribs began to show. Each breath pressed them harder against his skin. His legs grew weaker. At night, he lay on the wooden floor of the small house she had built for him. He shifted constantly, unable to find comfort. His bones pressed into the hard surface. His joints ached. When he closed his eyes, he felt her hand on his head, warm, steady, real. When he opened them, it was gone, so he stopped closing them. His walks became slower. One step, pause, breath. Another step. A small stone pressed into the pad of his paw. It stung. He used to shake it off without thinking. Now, even lifting his paw felt like too much. He kept walking. I walk. My legs shake. They feel like they belong to someone else. I stop to breathe. My chest hurts. Maybe today she'll be there. I lift my nose. The wind carries something. Dirt, leaves, the faint trace of rain. Not her. I take another step. My stomach is empty. It pulls at me, sharp and hollow. I haven't eaten. If I eat, I might miss her. I might miss the sound of the door, the sound of her voice. My knees buckle. I catch myself. The ground is cold beneath my paw. I can't fall. Not yet. Maybe today she'll call me from the bridge. Maybe I'll hear her say my name. Harper. I listen. Nothing. I take another step. My ribs press against my skin with every breath. My eyelids are heavy. I haven't slept. When I close my eyes, she's there. When I open them, she's gone. So I don't close them. I walk. Maybe today. The phone calls started coming. He's at the gazebo again. He's on the bridge. He won't move. Her daughter came. She found Harper sitting in front of the house, his body swaying slightly with each breath. He tried to stand when he saw her. His legs gave out. She knelt beside him. He was so light now. She could feel every bone through his fur. She carried him inside and locked the door. Harper stood in front of it. He pushed with his nose. The door didn't move. He pushed again. Still nothing. He stood there for a long time. Then he turned away. In the yard stood the small house she had built for him. Harper walked to it slowly, each step a battle. He tapped the door with his paw. Once, twice, no answer. He sat. Someone left food beside him. Water. He didn't look at it. His eyes stayed fixed on the door of the house. Days passed. Harper could barely stand. When he tried, his whole body shook. His breath came in short, shallow gasps. Snow began to fall. It landed on his back, soft and cold. For a moment it melted. His body still held a trace of warmth. Then even that faded. On the last day, Harper did not reach the gazebo. He did not reach the bridge. He lay inside the small house she had built, his nose pointed toward the door. His eyes stayed open, waiting eyes, as if she might still come. His breath grew shallow, slower, quieter, and then it stopped. Snow fell softly that day. The gazebo stood unchanged. The bridge waited. The door did not open.